Kia orana, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suzuki. Coming up, Dave Rennie is the new All Blacks coach. Also,
I call those years the dark years, and it really gave you a sense of hopelessness and loss of independence.
a Samoan musician shares his story of success, tragedy and advocacy, and Carnival cruise ditches some winter voyages. Find out why in a Pacific Business Update. Dave Rennie has been named the new All Blacks head coach through to the 2027 Rugby World Cup, seeing off Jamie Joseph in the two-man race to replace Scott Robertson. The 62-year-old former Chiefs coach and coach of the Wallabies was unveiled as the national coach in a New Zealand Rugby social media post on Wednesday. Rennie, who is of Cook Islands descent through his mother, becomes the first All Blacks head coach with Pasifika heritage. I spoke to PMN's Pacific Huddle co-host, Tuilangi William Leolahi, and began by asking for his initial thoughts on the appointment.
Yeah, for me, he's the right man for the job. Absolutely. I think New Zealand Rugby, considering the process they've taken to get to this point, especially from how the recent coach was let go, obviously shock in the system, not very All Black-like, but right now I think all of that can be brought back to where it should be, and I believe that they've got their man. They've definitely got their man on this one.
Why do you think he's the right person for the job? Can you talk us through his track record? How successful has he been as a coach for other teams?
Yeah, well, he's had Super Rugby success, especially with the Chiefs, winning championships for Super Rugby. He's also gone on and coached the Wallabies, which he had a very strong record there across in Australia, facing the All Blacks and facing the Springboks alike, and being in that when it was the Four Nations at the time. And also too, he's done well in Japan, just recently. So judging from that, he does have the credentials both globally and locally, and that's probably why I see him as the right fit right now.
But with the Wallabies, he had a similar exit to that of Scott Robertson. Do you think there may be a bit of concern for the ABs?
I think when you understand the context of it, the CEO at the time was Raelene Castle, for the Wallabies, and her exit was obviously compounded with his demise because she appointed him. And being in Australia, they wanted to get back to having an Australian coach and obviously rebuilding that. So, yeah, I think it was just he got into a situation that he couldn't control. Whereas I think now, being the All Blacks coach, being a Kiwi, he can really establish that now moving forward. What
do you think gave him the edge over Jamie Joseph, who I understand was also in the running for the top job?
Yeah, absolutely, and in a lot of respect to Jamie. For me, when you look at how the panel would have discussed the criteria, obviously international, they both coached at international level. Jamie Joseph was at Japan, and obviously Dave Rennie was at Australia. I think when you put those two things into consideration, you can grade them, but you'd say because of Australia, it would be a bigger grade that he coached that side more than a Japanese side. You also look at Super Rugby, Dave Rennie, they both won championships, but Dave Rennie's got more. And then you look at the context of where they are now in terms of all of that. I think for me, Dave Rennie's got the edge in terms of credentials, which they both share, but he's more higher graded. Whereas Jamie, I thought really his demise, or really what took what went against him, was not having Tony Brown. I think that was a big thing that would have elevated Jamie Joseph as the lead coach for the All Blacks, which is unfortunate. Obviously, because Tony Brown's been with Jamie at all these previous coaching engagements, I think it was just they needed him to be in this whole package in order for Jamie to get through. So I think that's what it is.
Do you think with Rennie having Pasifika heritage and the way that Scott Robertson had been let go, public opinion had pointed to Ari Savea as the main person that led the so-called revolt against Scott Robertson, do you think that has added a layer of expectation and scrutiny for Rennie, who's just come into the job?
Absolutely. 100%. I think that the panel would have taken that into account, that there is a growing Pacific influence in the All Blacks, and the fact that in terms of Ari Savea, made it vocal, and then he was actually public about it through what happened, but also too, with Rennie being of Pacific heritage, doesn't necessarily make him, more accustomed to Pacific, but we have seen the signature and the footprint in his teams. Like I remember, if you look at the Wallabies, there was a high influx of Pacific players that became the Wallabies during his era.
Right.
So you can see that there's a trend there that he actually knows how to engage with Pacifica. And not saying that Jamie wouldn't have had that same influence as well, but it's obviously been proven in terms of Dave Rennie's approach. And yes, of course, with everything that's going on and the shift and how things panned out for the All Blacks, being Ardie coming out publicly about it, this is one of those things that can help, resolve things like that. This is going to be the first ever head coach that has Pacific roots. So, yeah, definitely going to help the team moving forward in terms of Pacifica engagement.
What other changes do you think Rennie will bring to the team?
Look, he's only until 2027, till the World Cup. So I think more or less it's more or less just trying to find a little bit of clarity in his role. I mean, he's very, he comes across as a calm individual. He definitely shows composure and under pressure. And right now, because the role is so short-term, temporary, I think this is the guy for it. He's the man for 16 months out from Cup.
Yep.
And yeah, and I know that for him, he'll probably utilise the Springbok tour as a team building, as a cultural building, where they can really formalise their vision moving forward. Because that's a four-week tour with 7 games, which you got interim games in between. So I know he'll identify that tour as a team building, getting his players connected. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's there's not much he can actually bring in terms of difference because it's such a short-term thing. But I do know that there's going to be a lot of clarity now moving forward in terms of what the trajectory is, as David Kirk mentioned, that it wasn't going that way with Razor. Maybe they're just going to get this trajectory just to the Cup. And then after that, well, we'll see who the coach is going to be there. Yeah.
In terms of the direction, do you think they'll make Ardie Savea captain?
Me personally, I hope so. I actually felt that this was part of Razor's setback, was he didn't make Ardie captain, considering that Ardie was the vice captain during the World Cup. And he then replaced Sam Cane when Sam Cane was red carded. Ardie was captain for that final against the Springboks. So one would think that he just transitioned into the main role coming with the new coach. But obviously that wasn't to be. And I felt that that's where this whole thing has come from. I think it came from the fact that he wasn't named captain. He's been overshot. He's been overlooked. But then you look at the enormous season he had with Moana Pacifica.
Yeah.
And then how he turned that around. I think for me, the way he played for Moana was hey, New Zealand Rugby or Razor, take notice, because here I am inspiring a team that's not full of All Blacks, but look at the results. Now imagine what I could have done being the captain for the All Blacks, our national team. So yes, absolutely. I totally think that if he is appointed the captain, then, mate, it's all due to his form and where he's at right now. And I think, yeah, he should be the captain, absolutely. And as a captain, right, we've always seen it in history. When you're the captain, you're the number one pick for that position. And I felt like Scott Barrett, if he wasn't the captain, I don't think he would have made the All Blacks starting lineup, to be honest. I think he would have been the third-ranked lock. He could have come off the bench. But as a captain, you need to be the best player in the world in that position, most likely top 2, and then you need to be playing, pretty much the full game. Scott Barrett, with all due respect, he was going off when the game was on the line, if that makes sense. So he would play start, and then 60 minutes out, he's off. And that's sometimes where the game is won and lost, is in those last. So whereas Ardie would play the full game. So I thought it just makes sense. And, so 100%.
And now we come to Trade Winds, our weekly wrap-up of the latest business in the Pacific region. Tonight, the US strikes a deep-sea mining deal with Tonga, and a startup has their eye on Pacific shipwrecks. But first, Carnival Cruise is rolling back their Pacific voyages. With me is our reporter Kaya Selby. So Kaya, what's going on in the cruise sector?
Kia ora sana. So basically what's just happened is the Carnival Adventure, which is a great big iconic cruise ship in Australia and New Zealand, is no longer scheduling voyages in the winter months. That's going to happen from 2028 onwards. They're saying it will only sail in the summer, so that would be between November and April for each year. That might not seem like a big deal at first glance, but there is a bit to unpack. Carnival is a tourism supergiant, and the Carnival Adventure carries more than 2,600 people. That is a lot of customers. That's a lot of paying customers for Nomea, New Caledonia, for Port Vila and Vanuatu, for all of the outlying Fiji Islands, spending money at local restaurants and shops or visiting local attractions, and they are not getting them in winter. So it makes that Pacific tourism market just a little bit more seasonal. And it's a shame for them, though it isn't for another 2 years. A lot can happen in the meantime. It's just going to be seen as a bit of a kick in the teeth.
And what's Carnival's reasoning for this?
They've done it in a way that could read like a bit of a challenge to the governments of the region, Australia and New Zealand in particular. In their press release, they say there is an uncertain regulatory environment in Australia and New Zealand. Keep in mind the nature of this market, right? The ships start and finish in Australia or New Zealand. It's their relationships that matter most. And in Australia in particular, there have been a number of cruise lines just quit. Disney Cruises, Virgin Voyages, Cunard, they've all just said, nope, Australia's not for us. Royal Caribbean and Princess and now Carnival have all cut their deployment. This is not good for Pacific Island economies. They lean on this tourism spend, Sana, and all parties should probably keep that in mind.
All right, and meanwhile, can you give us the latest on US movements?
Well, following that big Pacific Business Summit in Honolulu, where island leaders were flocking to Hawaii to cut a deal, there were a bunch of deals made. They were mostly in the aid and development spaces. Quick list for you, Sana. There is funding for a new hospital in Palau. There is a $2 million grant for combating illegal fishing. There is an open skies agreement with Samoa that takes away some flight travel restrictions. That'll be useful for travel between them and American Samoa. There's a feasibility study for a new fuel storage facility in Tonga. There's money for subsea connection. It goes on and on. There's a lot of money being thrown around that will make Pacific governments very happy for the time being.
And one of those is a deep-sea mining agreement?
Yeah, in Tonga, in fact, after Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau visited last Friday, the State Department said in a presser that it's a cooperation agreement. It's a dialogue. It advances marine scientific research. And when you see that and you think, oh, that's quite nice, but then it says to explore seabed mineral resources. We know that Tonga is sold on deep-sea mining. They're keen on it. There have been agreements since 2021 with the metals company out of Canada, for example. But it is important to note this is a nascent market. There is a framework for regulations that's still being laid down. There is a global regulatory body that the US is actually trying to surpass so that they can unilaterally regulate their own mining in the Pacific Ocean and elsewhere. The question is, how will Pacific Island governments benefit? How will they share in the riches and avoid being exploited?
And what can you tell us about the shipwreck startup?
Oh, okay, this is quite an interesting one. There is a new startup out of Switzerland called Ocean, and what they essentially want to do is access shipwrecks and evacuate all of their treasure. So gold, silver, the whole lot. Many loots. Naturally, as the largest ocean in the world, the Pacific has their attention. Their people have told us they've got their eye specifically on the west coast of the US, Japan and the Philippines in the north, and then French Polynesia, Papua New Guinea, and a broader number of islands in Melanesia. I chatted with Stefan von Imhoff. He is a financier for Ocean. He says they're looking at 3 kind of categories of shipwreck based on their accessibility and their value. Here's what he had to say.
On the low end, you're talking about anywhere from like 20 to like $50 million. Medium is like 50 to probably about 250, and then the high end is 250 and above. Our expeditions are going to be focusing on the low-hanging fruit, which in this case is the tier 1. Those economics have changed, though, over the past 6 to 12 months as the price of silver and gold have shot up, right? So the low-end expeditions didn't used to be nearly as lucrative.
So have they already started treasure hunting?
Not yet. They say they're in their research phase. They will have to identify where they want to go based on the actual likelihood of finding all that treasure, right? So I'm told most of that is in sort of the Caribbean, the Mediterranean. They'll have to put their expedition teams together, get the rough coordinates, send the submarines down. There's a lot that goes with it. But it's a gamble, which is really weird because if they get it wrong, like if they find a shipwreck and there's nothing in it, they've just wasted an entire expedition. So but the question that I had was, how do you get around that kind of risk? Here's what Stefan said about that.
We can strike out once or twice in the first, 4 to 5 at-bats. I think we're hoping for a 60 to 70% success rate, but we do not need to have every mission be successful. What we have to make sure of, though, is that we don't strike out like 4 to 5 times in a row. I think that's going to be really tough to recover from.
So there are some interesting questions coming out of that. Furthermore, would a government demand a share of the loot, right? Given that a shipwreck has landed in their economic zone and they would have to require permission, could a country trace ownership back centuries to find where that ship sank, demand a share? This has all yet to be seen, but Ocean say they are engaging with governments outside of the Pacific. That will be their testing ground. They'll come here when they've figured all of their stuff out. So as we always say, watch this space.
Samoan musician Whanoti Pati Umanga is bringing his life story to the stage this week, detailing his successful music career, the fall that changed his life, the depression and his advocacy for the disabled community. The music portrait of a humble disabled Samoan premieres at Te Ahure Toi o Tamaki Auckland Arts Festival on Thursday. Tiana Haxton sat down with Umanga to talk about his latest work.
When Whanoti Pati Umanga slipped in the shower in 2005, he didn't know it would be the last day he would ever feel his legs.
While I was in the shower, I actually slipped, and I can remember that I was doing the running man, trying to get my balance, and then my feet just flipped up in the air, and I fell out of the shower, and my butt hit the floor, and the back of my head slammed into the wall, and all I could hear was this crack in my neck.
He walked into a hospital later that morning, not expecting it to be the last time he would ever walk. That night, surgeons fused his spine, and he has been in a wheelchair ever since. Before his fall, Umanga's career began with a family band, performing alongside his brothers in church. He later joined the Holiday Makers playing bass guitar, and their cover of Bill Withers' Sweet Lovers topped the music charts in the late 80s, launching the band to fame.
No, I had no idea that the Holiday Makers song would even get to the #1 spot at the time. It just blew me away, and then as it started climbing up the charts, I was thinking, no, it can't be, and then went to #1, and I was just like, wow.
That same year, the group collected 10 awards at the New Zealand Music Awards. His fall changed everything.
I call those years the dark years, and it really gave you a sense of hopelessness and loss of independence, and I think that was the biggest thing for me. And all I can remember was, you're disabled now, so that's the end of your life.
Depression and addiction followed, but with help from a former street kid he had supported during his time as a youth worker, Umanga pushed through. He became a strong advocate for the disabled community, organising conferences for Māori and Pacifica disabled people and contributing to policy changes. Now, more than 2 decades later, Umanga's life story will be shared on stage. The show's director, Maiva Nathaniel Lees, who has known Umanga for nearly 4 decades, was committed to the project from the get-go.
He wanted to really point out the disabled community's situations. And I said, well, the way to do that is to go through Pati, through you, through your story.
Lees says it takes courage to tell your own story to a live audience.
To be on stage and people are talking about you, and then a whole lot of people are sitting around listening about your life, you got to think, you got to be pretty brave to do that. But we have a good time.
On stage, 3 wheelchair users, including Umanga, will be performing alongside seasoned actors and musicians. Umanga hopes their presence challenges stigmas against people with disabilities.
Some of them are saying that, disability is a curse. And that kind of attitude permeates across the whole of our societies. And I want a production like this to actually break all that down and challenge all that stigma and say, no, we're just as capable and just as independent as others, but we just have a different way of doing it.
With Auckland shows selling out fast, Umanga admits he feels nervous.
And I'm feeling moments of vulnerability. And I guess it's because my journey has always been my journey. I'd never thought that it could be meaningful to anybody else other than myself. And so to come to a full show like this, and it really is like a deep dive, full-on exposure of my life in front of hundreds of people, man, it's still freaking me out a bit, but I trust the people I work with.
The music portrait of a humble disabled Samoan premieres at the Te Ahure Toi o Tāmaki Auckland Arts Festival from 5th to 8th of March, before heading to Wellington for the Aotearoa New Zealand Festival of the Arts from 12th to 14th of March.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā, sui fua.